Lord, it was just unbelievable. Nico is getting married this summer.
Oh, wow.
Fancy wedding is going to take place on Nantucket Island.
Oh.
He's 40 years old.
Wow.
So the Johnsons are very, very excited about that. And I've been getting little invitations and things that say, make your reservations soon. I think I'll skip that one.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. So no, those were very interesting days, and some extraordinarily interesting people
Right.
would come for supper. We would get to know them, and it would be a lot of fun. But I just don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's too bad. I don't do it with friends, never mind strangers.
Right, yeah. No, I do remember, just the house being totally packed with people
Yeah.
at times.
And sometimes very interesting things. I
Yeah.
remember sometimes on New Year's Eve we'd have the colonists and anybody who wanted to get up, and the idea was not to have the typical, in those days, and
Mhm.
maybe still, I don't know, in those days, the typical drunken New Year's Eve.
Mhm.
And the idea was to have something that was, a little more elevated, and anybody who wanted to get up and read a poem or play some music or sing a
Mhm.
song or whatever could do. And then the goal was, from my point of view, was that we would, everybody would have just to do that, and would have a nice supper,
Mhm.
and then they'd all go home at midnight. And it never worked out that way. They would they then, after all the nice sort of artistic, intellectual activity would take place, then the music would come on, and they would dance till 2 or 3 in the morning, finally leaving just as small children were beginning to wake up. Oy.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyway.
What do you think the most people were ever at the house at one time? How many people do you think?
There were a couple of occasions when, well, even for Monadnock music,
Were those bigger gatherings than the colony?
I think there were times when very close to, not too many times, but close to 100 people would be there. And I can remember a political gathering when, several political gatherings when probably about 120 people were there. But I mean, those had specific purposes.
Right.
But actually, I remember, and I think this was after Dad died, I remember putting on a sit-down dinner in the big room, lots of chairs borrowed from the Harris Center, and tables, card tables and things set up. And there was this sit-down dinner for something like 65 people, and I didn't use a single paper plate or plastic cup. Everything was, really quite proper. And I had several of those, but I think those were after Dad died. And those might have been from Monadnock music. Or some kind of a benefit for McDowell or something like that, various things like that. I remember one time when we had dinner before a big dance at McDowell, and everybody was having so much fun. Nobody went to McDowell to the dance, and finally they called up and said, "Where are you all?" Anyway, but those were very interesting, very good years. And we had, the chance to get to know some extraordinarily interesting writers, composers. Not too many distinguished painters, a few.
When did Padma come into that whole scene?
She and Victor were both there at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
They were married, and both were writers, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, the girls were fairly young,
Mm-hmm.
because I remember she used to, well, maybe Tara might have been 10 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not much more
So
than that,
before
because I
13.
remember she
Mm-hmm.
used to come with this huge suitcase full of all her saris,
Mm-hmm.
and she would wrap the girls up
Mm-hmm.
in the saris, and they just think they were the most absolutely glamorous, beautiful creatures. And that's how I learned how to do a sari. I had never put one on. She just put them on your sisters. Yeah. I feel so badly not to be in touch with her. I think her life has gone really quite poorly in recent years.
She had another marriage, or
She did have another marriage, and
she moved out to Washington, right?
she
Somewhere,
moved out to
Oregon,
Washington, and this guy had always adored her, and she thought at one point, and he did all kinds of things for her that were really took care of her wonderfully. And somehow or other she thought he was playing around with another woman, so she banished him from her life. And people who knew her and knew him thought that she had done something really pretty harsh, and she wouldn't forgive him or whatever. I don't remember the details of the story, but it was really quite sad. And then she had no one to take care of her after that. So she battered around, and she had been a very well-published author, but she got more and more and more esoteric, and the last published work of hers was very beautiful, but really it would appeal to only a very, very small audience of people, and I'm sure she didn't make any money on it at all. And then friend Fleur Weymouth, who had been married to Alan Block, remember they used to spend the summers up, if you go down to the Merrill's house and turn right, there was a sort of a house way up there that was in poor condition, but Fleur and Alan would live there in the summertime, and Fleur was the one, because of our road, that got the inspiration to get the scenic roads law passed in New Hampshire. But anyway, she and Alan eventually broke up, and she at one point moved to Hawaii, and she and Padma were very close, and I think they shared the exact same birthday or something like that. And so Padma went out to Hawaii, and she said how the Hawaiians, the natives, really, really loved her and wanted to take care of her and everything. It sounded like not a very good kind of thing, and I guess eventually it didn't work out. And the last I heard, she had moved back to Colorado, where her brother was living in Boulder, Colorado, and she always called it moldering in Boulder. And I feel terrible that I haven't been in touch with her, but I'm a terrible correspondent, and she hasn't been back east for years and years. She did at one point come and spend a winter in Peterborough. She rented a place in Peterborough. But she gave up. I mean, her writing was just marvelous. And she had huge success, where Victor had no success at all. He kept getting pink slips and things like that, rejects from the publishers. But she gave up that whole thing and was writing really very difficult and esoteric things that were hard for people to understand.
Who are some of the other kind of prominent people that you, I mean, there must be